Hello, it's Tony here from Historic American Homes. This is part two of Designing a French Palace. We are in Adventures in Historic Architecture. In this episode, we're going to look at doing the pediment, the cornice, and working out the cornice and pediment so that there's no distortion in the elements as we go into the angles. We've got brackets that need to fit into the angles. And we're going to be using a few basic SketchUp commands to do all of this. Just move, copy, a mirror, using components, mirrored components to do symmetry. So here's where it's at, our little French palace. The next step, I've I've created the details for what goes around the window and door openings. I'm not doing the little curlicue bits for the time being, stuff up here, stuff down here. I may or may not do them. It's not really necessary. Anyhow, what I wanted to show you was the main entrance has these two pilasters that rise on either side, and then there's the cornice. And making that cornice was quite some work, but it came together. What I did was I made this little box over here just as a convenient spot to put things. And what I'm doing is I'm building the profiles. So there's our cornice profile. And that's the, what do they call it? Bracket. Anyway, so that's the cornice profile of the main house. And then I've got the profile that I'm going to use for balconies. And this is the window frame, this window frame here. So I just start by doing them as little 2D blocks and keeping them set aside for future convenience. And then I'll take that cornice piece and put it up here and use the push-pull tool to extrude it. So let me copy one. I'll just stick it up here and then edit, edit group. And within the cornice, I've got the block, I've got the cornice itself, and then I've got the bracket as two separate groups, just so that they're easier to manipulate. Edit group, P for push-pull, and you can just stretch it out like that. Or if you want, you can trace some kind of a profile. Let me do this a little more carefully. And then you can use the follow me tool, select everything in that group, deselect the profile, Control F for follow me, and it gives you the cornice profile. I'm going to reverse faces so that I've got the correct face outward. Anyway, so that's how I built it. Those are the SketchUp tools I used to build the cornice. However, I originally had these pilasters projecting out about 4 inches. It wasn't really easy to, couldn't really tell from the photos how far they projected out. And so at about 4 inches, 3.5 or 4 inches, I then went in and put in all these little brackets. And when I first laid them out, based on what I could see in the photos, it appeared as if the brackets were about 2 inches closer in. And this cornice piece projected out about 3.5 or 4 inches. And I ended up with a conflict right here where the two brackets were interfering with each other. So I had to do two things to solve that problem. The first was to pull all of these a couple of inches to the right, and then to extend the pilaster another 4 inches out. So I think it's now 8 inches deep. And by extending it out, and I determined how much to extend it out because what I did was I knew the width. I had the width. I laid out my brackets up here from, there were 5 brackets in the drawing and in the photo extending, and the bracket came right to the edge. So I laid out the 5 brackets and then I wrapped it around the corner. And then based on that, I just extended this dimension of the depth of the pilaster and to the point where I could get these brackets on symmetrical on either side of the inside corner. So that way when you're standing on the ground looking up at that roof line there, it's a nice consistent look. And that brought up an interesting relationship between the parts here. If you're laying out a structure like this and you want to have that cornice wrapping around, and perhaps you've got a wing that bumps out and then steps back, you will want to consider the module, the typical distance between these brackets, and use that module as your dimension. So if I wanted to bring this out further, I wouldn't just go another 2 inches or 3 inches or something. That would leave me with just a mess of conflicting brackets again. What I would do is I would take that center to center dimension. Let's see, what is that? 9 inches. And I would either go out another 9 inches or another 18 inches or another 27 inches, like that. So that was a nice exercise, a nice way to learn a little more about how to apply the classical cornice so that it looks good. The other thing I did in the last step was to make these window frames, the trim around the windows, and I made them as blocks, as components. So if I need to change them for some reason, all I have to do is change one, and the copies will all change. There's a little balcony piece, like an extended windowsill, which is going to get an iron railing. That's a component as well. So when I get ready to make the iron railing, I can just drop it right inside that component, and all of the windows will have their openings. I also then extended the walls out. Originally, we were looking at just the middle 3 bays, but I looked at the plans and scaled off the plans to determine the spacing of the windows, and they appeared to be something like 10 feet. So they appear to be 10 feet on center. So now that I've got these pieces, I can copy to all the other openings. Same with the first floor, the ground level. M control is the copy command, 120 inches, and then times 2 to get 2 of them. So that's where we are today. Starting to come together, starting to look like a building. I'm going to have to adjust the wall heights up here and start working on the roof, but the first thing I'm going to do is take it right to the corners and then build a rectangle of that shape, and then start working on the roof line. Well, that's the status. Hope you're enjoying this. I'll come back with more in the next day or so. Let's take a look at the pediment. That's this triangular portion here in the middle. The first thing I wanted to see was the height versus the width. So starting at the center point, starting at the center line here, just going by eye, and I actually measured off the photograph, the height from this point at the bottom of the middle, at the bottom of the center, up to right there, not the top, but right there. That appears to be twice the distance from the center to that point, that left end. If we follow this angle upward, it takes us to there. So we're looking at a triangle that has sides of 1 and 2. So that's what we're going to use for the angle of our pediment. And to see it in the drawing, 1 to 2. Now, this is a bit tricky, and this is something that people often don't grasp when they're not familiar with the details of a classical design. What we have is the cornice here, and the piece of the cornice that goes from here down to here, it's called the corona. Make sure I got my jargon correct here. I brought up some pictures. Yeah, corona. So you see corona. And then above that is cyma. And traditionally, the corona is continuous all the way across, and the corona angles up. The cyma angles up, but the cyma actually stops here. It does not continue along the side here. What you're seeing in the drawing is not the cyma, that is a piece of profile, metal profile for the gutter. So the corona is continuous, and then the cyma follows the shape of the pediment. And the traditional profile for the cyma is laid out along this edge, which I'll show you in the model. We go over to our little profile here. This is the corona, and this is the cyma. So when I did my cornice all the way across, you will see that I have the corona but no cyma, just this part. And as we come to the middle here, we end up with this. This is the cyma. Now, how do we make that cyma? That's the tricky bit. You can't just, well, at first, my first impulse when I was first learning to do this was the wrong impulse, and I think it's one a lot of people do. You can't just take this profile and sort of wrap it around, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Here's the profile of the cyma, and I'm going to make a sort of a, imagine it's almost like a tabletop with it. So we see that nice S-curve wrapping around the corner. Well, that looks fine at first glance, but there's a problem with it. If I take this and put it up on top of my roof now, I'm going to grab it from that corner, and I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to plop it down right there. Okay, so now I've got it flat. And if I were just doing a flat cornice all the way around the building with no pediment, I could put that in there and then use that to hide the gutter. But actually, that's not the way it's done when you have a pediment. So now what I need to do is I need to rotate this upward to get the angle. But then that's where you're going to see the problem arise. So I'm going to rotate it upward. I'm going to rotate from this edge up to, oh, darn it, the whole building. Grab that again. Okay, grab that, rotate it from this edge up to that guideline there. Okay, again, at first glance, everything looks like it's okay, but you see that this is leaning way out compared to this. Let me pull this forward a little bit so you can see it better. You see the difference between this angle and that angle? And the problem becomes bigger as we go to a steeper slope. If I were to continue to rotate that, I'd end up with the point where that edge is almost flat again. So instead of rotating, just taking the whole thing and rotating, what you have to do, move that out of the way. What you have to do is make your flat box. Actually, let's bring it back. And let's rotate it back to where it was flat. What you have to do is you have to take your flat piece, and basically you're going to grab this edge and lift it up like that. And that's how you get this. So this curve is not actually the same as this curve. At first glance, they look kind of the same, but this one has been stretched upward. And that's how you get the correct profile on this side and the correct angle on the front. You also get the correct projection from the side. Now the last step here is to take a piece of my cornice, which I've done already, and move that underneath it. grab that corner. That's going to end up under here. And start to see how it's going to look. Now I just need to do some cleanup. Move that out where I can get to it a little more easily to do my cleanup. I'm going to trim off the chunk here that intersects with the stuff below. Quick and easy way to do that, I'll draw a rectangle. Doesn't matter how big, just as long as it's big. And I will copy it into here. And everything that's down there I want to trim off. Intersect faces with model. Now I should be able to go in here and select from the right to the left and grab everything that's under there. That's all trimmed off clean. I can delete my rectangle. And just because I like things to be closed, I'm going to go back in here and draw one line. And that closes that. And now I can push that back to where it's supposed to be. And I will do the same thing. I'll find the center line and do the same process to cut it in the middle. I'll take my cyma here and stretch that up to the middle. And then lastly, we've got our little brackets. Now I haven't put, I did the same thing with the bracket, by the way, as I did with the cyma. I took one of these brackets, and basically distorted the edge. Let me pull one out. So I've got one here. That's a component, and I didn't want, and I can't mess with that, or I mess them all up. So I have to make that a new component, make unique. Right click and make unique. Now that's an individual component which I can play with, and it won't mess everything else up. So what I did was I had to separate it into two parts. Everything down here I made into a group, and then everything up here I made into a group. And then I was able to just take that chunk and pull it up like that to get the distortion, to get the angle that I needed for my little bracket. Okay, so I've taken that cyma, that top piece there, and I've stretched it all the way out up to the top here. So I've got lots of extra here. And then I made myself a little surface, simple rectangle, which is aligned with the center line of the building now. And I've pulled it up to where it intersects both the cyma and the rest of the cornice. And now I can just go in and I can trim. So I can go into my cyma, select everything, right click, intersect faces with model, and it's intersecting where it is encountering this surface that I've got. So now this is separate from that. I can select everything from right to left and grab everything here and delete it. And I can repeat that with my cornice. Select everything, intersect faces with model, right to left selection and delete. And now I'm done with my surface. I can delete that, and I'll go in and close these up. Let's see, so I'll just draw a line along one of the existing edges, and that'll close it up. All right, those are nice and clean. And then what I'll need to do is take my little bracket here, and I'm going to see if I can just put it up here for now. Let's see. So that puts it right exactly on the center line, which is not the right place for it. Let's look at the picture. We've got it They're quite closely spaced. There's about as much space between them as they are wide, and they're 3 inches wide. I think I've spaced mine a little bit wider than that, which I should probably fix, but I'm going to leave it the way it is for now. The brackets are 3 inches wide, and I think I put 6 inches in between. Anyway, let's take a look at the photo. Maybe I went by the photo. Yeah, I think I went by the photo. There seems to be a little more space between the brackets than they are wide. So I will move this down a little bit. Go 1.5 inches. Let's go 2 inches. I'll make it 3 inches. And move that bracket. Now it's 3 inches off the center line. And then I'm going to do a guideline 9 inches over and copy. And then multiply times, oh, I'm just guessing here. I'll start with 8. I've got it right. That was 8 copies. Let me just try 7. Okay, 8 looks like the number. All right. So there's my brackets in place. And now what I can do is I'm going to take the brackets, cornice, and the cyma, put them all into a group. I seem to have made a group out of that chunk. That looks all right. For some reason, I've got something hidden inside there that I'm not seeing. I've got this, this group box should not be extending off into the space here. So I'm going to do a little research to see why that is and then clean it up, and I'll come back. All right, I found the stray line. There was a little invisible line in there that I had to erase, and I got rid of it and cleaned it up and got rid of the excess from the file so that we can see more clearly what's going on here. And I have my piece in place where it's supposed to go. I've grouped everything into one collection of subgroups. Now, I'll show you a little technique that's often useful. There's two different ways. Well, what I've done is I've got this trick that I often use when I'm dealing with stuff that's symmetrical, and that's to take the piece on one side of the center line. It can be a roof or something like this, or a window frame. Take one and only draw half of it and make it a component. So I've actually done that with this cornice here. You see the cornice, this cornice is split right at the center line of the building. And in fact, they're copies of each other. This is a component, and I've simply copied it and mirrored it over to here. And if I change something, let's say we decide to add another set of windows and make the building longer, I can change half of it. Now watch the left side of the screen. As I move the right side, the left side also moves. So that allows me to not have to edit both ends. I can just clean it up in one spot. So what I would do is I would take this chunk here. I would right click, turn it into a component. I'm not actually going to go through the steps right now, but I would make it a component. And then I would copy the component over. And then I would use the scale command, grab the little handle and pull it the other way. So it's a mirror image, type -1, makes it an exact mirror image. And now when I change one side, the other changes as well. I would just grab this, drag it back over to where it was. So there you go. Now, I'm not going to do that on this piece now because I'm going to do something else. I've already done that with this cornice here. So what I can do is I can simply cut this, Control X, go into my cornice. It says solid component, looking at the upper right corner of my screen, solid component 2 in model, cornice 1. I'm going to go into cornice 1 and I'm going to paste in place. That's Control Shift V, paste in place, and it pasted it on both sides. because what I did was I edited the cornice component by adding that chunk into the cornice component. So there it is on both sides. Now I've got plenty of work left to do here before it's all wrapped up. I'm not going to go through every step of it. Because of this piece that steps out here, this alignment that we need to have, this cornice is actually in front of the portions on either side. That means that the face, coming back here, you can see that there's a gap here behind it. So I'm going to need to fill that in and do some other cleanup work, and then when I move onto the roof, eventually I'll do the last bit of getting it all worked out. So that's the cornice and the pediment and the window frames, and using components and mirroring components where you have symmetrical elements. I'll tell you one last thing. Just occurred to me I can tell you one last thing about doing these symmetrical components. There's actually a line here where it ends. You may not actually want to see that line when your model is finished, but you need it there. You need the line in order to have the geometry complete. What I like to do, you can use, there's a command called hide you can use, but I like to have a layer called concept always off. And then what I do is I simply take those lines that I don't want to see, and I put them on the concept always off layer up here on the top right corner. You can see concept always off. And then most of the time I can just turn that tag off, and I'm seeing what I want to see. But if I should need to get in there and edit it for some reason, all I have to do is turn that tag back on and I can get to it. You see, for example, I had a little triangle that I drew in here to get my roof slope. I put that on the always off layer as well. That way, in case I need to refer back to it in the future, it's still there to use. I see a stray bracket. Get rid of him. Isn't it looking nice? We've almost got the front finished. At some point I'll have to go in and start working on the windows. That'll be another video all by itself. So that's enough for today. I'm going to put these videos together and put it up in the next day or two. Hope you enjoyed it. Please click like, click subscribe, come back for the next one. Let your friends know. Have a great day. Bye-bye.